Hello, 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 and welcome back. Welcome back to the first Sabbath program. Can you just imagine? Like, it's already been a month and we're back again. I thank you. I thank you all that are watching today. If you're watching, we love on you. We thank you for that. But there's one thing we would like you to do before we get started with everything. Share this link with a friend of yours. Share it with anybody that you know so that they can come and join and get some good information that we have today and meet some of the amazing guests and learn some things that we're going to talk about today. So go ahead and share that link. Go ahead and share that link. Copy it. Share it to your friends. I know you have some friends there. They're just sitting around the house not doing something this afternoon. So just send it to them, and they can sit down and watch our program this afternoon. Before we get started with our program, we're going to have a word of prayer. Let us pray. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you. We just want to thank you for allowing us to come together. We want to also thank you for technology to allow us to do such a thing of this magnitude, dear God. So as we progress through this program, we ask that you would shower your blessings on the words that we're going to say, on the individuals that we're going to interview on today. And we just want to say thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we move on, I do want to let you all know our usual host, Miss Jackson, she's not available to be with us today. So we do have someone else with us, Miss Campbell. Just keep Miss Jackson in prayer. She's going through a couple of family things, so just keep her in prayer as we go through this program. But we do have Miss Campbell with us, and I'm going to pass it over to her as we continue in this program.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hyde. I'm so excited to be a part of this particular panel. We have a wonderful group of guests, a very eclectic group tonight. We have Dr. Abraham Henry, who is the Executive Secretary of the Lake Region Conference. We have Dr. Vandeon Griffin, who is the Executive Secretary of the South Central Conference. We have Mrs. Kelley Paris, who is the Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer for Central States Conference. And we have Pastor Kirk Nugent, who is the media pastor for Oakwood University SDA Church. We are so excited to have all of you here. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great being
Thank
here.
you all. Thank you all. So, without further ado, we're going to get right into our program. We have, as you can see, a group of guests here with us, and we don't want to delay. We want to get all this great information in for tonight. So, we're going to start off and we're going to talk with Pastor Dr. Vandeon Griffin. How are you doing tonight?
Oh man, glad to be here with you. Doing well. A little tired. Well, a whole lot tired. We're at mass admission today, so we're trying to recover.
Understood, understood. I feel like this may be a bit of exaggeration, but I feel like I've known you basically my entire life growing up in South Central Conference. Um, but for the people that may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
In actuality, Brother Hyde, I have known you your entire life before you came about. Your parents, I've known your parents forever, um, so this is a little surreal to be interviewed by you, but glad to be on here with you and to Elder Edmond and Mrs. Campbell. Good to see you all. Thank you for having me. Just a little bit about myself. Born in Greenville, Mississippi, and at 6 months old, my mother moved us to Joliet, Illinois, and so that's where I grew up. The biggest part of my life, and then around 13 years old, my mom moved us back to the South, and that's where I finished school and went on to Oakwood and Andrews and things of that nature. So that's kind of my that's the Griff notes of my existence. But yeah, so a Mississippi born, Illinois raised, and then back to the South, where I finished school and went on to one of the greatest schools, Oakwood University. Yeah.
So you went to Oakwood, and tell us a little bit about your ministry after you graduated from Oakwood. Tell us about your ministry, your journey in ministry.
Yeah,
Where did you go? What did you do? Tell us a little bit.
absolutely. Finishing Oakwood, and it was all of this is funny right now. But finishing Oakwood, just before I finished, I was interviewed by the South Central Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And in that room was Dr. G. Russell C., Elder Joseph W. McCoy, and Elder Dana C. Edmond. And all three of those gentlemen interviewed me. And I have some funny stories about how that interview went. So as not to get in trouble today, I'll withhold those stories. But it was that interview. And I think maybe a week later or so, or 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from Elder Edmond, who said to me, Archbishop is one of his favorite words. If you all haven't heard that before, that's one of his favorite words. Archbishop, it is my privilege to extend to you a call by the executive committee to the South Central Conference by way of Andrews Theological Seminary of Seventh-day Adventists. So that's how it all began. And so I went from Oakwood to Andrews and finished there in 2 years exactly, and started my pastoral ministry as the pastor of the Ebenezer Seventh-day Adventist Church in Gaston and the Mount Olive Seventh-day Adventist Church in Anniston, Alabama. Back in those days, we would call ourselves the senior pastor, even though we were the only pastor. So no, I was just served there for 3 years exactly. But in between those 3 years, before I hit that 3-year mark, I was extended a call to be the youth director for the South Central Conference. And the administrators at the time, Elder Benjamin Brown, Philip Palmer, and Elder Edmond, they gave me an extension in Anniston and Gaston to complete my 3 years. So I was doing a dual role of youth director and pastoring 2 churches until the first Sabbath in August of 2006, to be exact. And that was primarily because I started the first Sabbath in August 2003. So they allowed me to complete those 3 years and do a dual role. So I did that, youth director for 10 years in South Central Conference. And it's very humbling. I stood to preach in Madison Mission to see all of these young people who are young adults. And I made an admission in church today for the very first time. I am old. To see all of these kids talking about, living on their own and paying bills. And I was just like, this cannot be real. But yeah, so I served as youth director in this conference 10 years. And then afterwards, asked to serve as personal ministries and Sabbath school director for South Central Conference. I did that for exactly 18 months and then extended a call to the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists to serve as the associate youth director for the North American Division.
Wow. All right, Elder Griffin, thank you for sharing that information. This program is primarily to introduce our constituents to the new leaders that we have, particularly the younger leaders that we have. And so I'm not really feeling it when you talk about being old, since you knew Brother Hyde when he was born. I knew his mother when she was an elementary school student, and so of course I knew you, yes, sir, as a teenager growing up. So I'm not really hearing the old. Okay, you spent a portion of your life growing up in South Central, and now South Central in July called you back to be the second officer of the conferences. That's kind of unusual in regional conferences. I don't think we have very many of our administrators that grew up in the conference that they're leading, particularly amongst our secretaries. So kind of tell us what that's like. What are the advantages of being one of the lead administrators in the conference where you grew up?
I think the big advantage for me is it's home. number one. Number two, not only having grown up in South Central Conference, but being a worker in South Central Conference. Again, I served as youth director for 10 years, and I had an overwhelming support of the pastors and the constituents of this conference for the entire 10 years as youth director. I never, praise God, I never missed a goal of delegates to Congress, or the numbers that we needed for summer camp, or raising money to meet budget. For the entire 10 years, I had the support of all of our pastoral leaders. And I can't think of a better ride than as youth director, which was just overwhelming. Understanding the lineage, Mrs. Campbell, of the people that I had to follow. Huge shoes, one of which is on here with us today. And so for me to have that amazing success, I would say, as youth director, one of the advantages of coming back is I know a lot of people, and I have had so much support, since July and this thing happening, in terms of phone calls, text messages, people seeing me. The affirmations have been amazing. So I think one of the advantages is it's not brand new in terms of the territory or the people. Now, the pastors have changed, but we still have quite a few of the pastors that were here when I left 5 years ago. So it's been a great thing.
Are there any disadvantages? And I don't know if you would admit it if there were, but I'll ask the question anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some disadvantages because it's a role that there has not been any mentorship at this point. And so learning some of the learning curve is there, and getting a clear understanding of role and function, and then who are your supporting cast outside of the office building, that is in your local churches. So I think that's a disadvantage that I believe we can actually mitigate if we're intentional, especially in regional conferences, by sharing information, talking to leaders, not just one group of one person, but I think we need to do mentorship on a holistic scale to make sure that people who have the giftedness, and they may not even have the desire, they should be made aware of here's what this role entails. Here are the things that you can do to advance the kingdom and make sure that you stay on mission. So yeah.
Now, speaking of not having the desire, there is even though you are a wonderful youth director, there's a backstory that I'm gonna ask you to tell about when you were asked at first to serve as youth director. Tell us that backstory.
If I understand what you're talking about, I said no, of not wanting to be youth director, and was working very hard to make sure that it did not happen. But the current president at the time was not hearing a word I had to say, nor was his wife hearing a word that I had to say. And so, for those who were there in 2006, they tell me they've not seen very many people go to a microphone and say thank you, but no thank you. And the president say, we're going to vote it anyway. Especially when the person behind me said thank you, but no thank you. And it was affirmed. His no thank you was affirmed. So I think it became clear to me maybe 4 or 5 years into serving as youth director that it was bigger than me. It was what God had called me to do, whether I wanted to do it or not.
Okay. Thank you. And by the way, that was not me. I actually tried to talk to the president on your behalf. He wasn't hearing me either. But I believe it was a God thing.
Yeah. And the rest of it is, after he wasn't hearing you, He was like, well, oh, it looks like, you're going to have to do this job. So pull it together and let's get it done. So, yeah. And I had the privilege to work with you as president and serve another term as youth director. And I think that was amazing to have a former youth director as your president, of which I have shared that at the North American Division as well with Alex Bryant.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Griffin. We've talked about you serving in many different responsibilities. One that wasn't mentioned is my personal favorite, your time twice as interim pastor at my church, stepping in at exactly the right time. So of all the responsibilities, and you don't have to pick Hillcrest, of course, and I'm not even going to ask you which responsibility is your favorite, but particularly in this role as executive secretary, what's something within this role that you have enjoyed the most up to this point?
To be totally honest, I'm still figuring everything out, but vision casting and talking about the opportunities that we can make available for all of our teammates. I don't like to call them workers, all of our teammates, all the opportunities that we can provide in terms of support, vision casting, in service tools at the tip of their fingers. I'm excited about what that looks like, and so casting a vision for that, and what can the church be in South Central Conference in its most immediate state, and that is right now, where we are now in 2022 as we move into 2023. What can our churches look like, and advancing that cause and that mission, making sure that our technology is top notch, no matter their church size, making sure that our worship experiences are done with excellence, and we have clear tenets that we follow in terms of vision for our churches. Every church should have tight records and be able to say, here's what we're doing, here's our numbers, here's how many people we have coming to our church, here's what our money looks like. I mean, just making sure all of those things are not done by accident, but intentionality. So I think I'm excited about making sure that we can have a conference that is well run with excellence.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Griffin, you have a lot of experience under your belt. You've worked on the conference level, you've worked at the division level. So tell us a little bit about the differences and the similarities between working in these different entities.
I would say the difference is at the conference level, you literally get a chance to rub shoulders with those who are on the ground. Every Sabbath, I would say, for the last 16 years that I was in the 14 years that I was in the office, just about every week I was in some church with a group of people, rubbing shoulders with them, having worship with them, eating with them, doing leadership training and programming. That happened every single week. I think the difference is at the division level, it's a bigger net as opposed to being in a local church. You had a huge event and you're doing training for 300 or 400 people as opposed to 20 people in a church, or one-on-one with a AY leader or Sabbath school teacher. I think the other difference is, as a local conference leader, your focus is what can you do for that particular church to advance its mission. On the division level, you have to think in terms of diversity, and it's not one church, but it's the 6,000 churches that are housed in the North American Division, to include the church in Canada, Guam, and Micronesia, and creating ministry and programming that is general enough, but yet impactful at the same time to meet those needs. And so local, you're laser focused on the local conference. North American Division, it's the entire division. And I think the other thing is that we, at the division level, we didn't or don't create resources just for the joy of creating resources. They are based on a task force that expresses a need, and because they don't have the time or the resources, human resource or financial resources to get those programming created, it's our responsibility to create those at the division.
So, Dr. Griffin, because the division level has such a wide reach, what impact can division have on ministry on the local church level?
Yeah, I think that what many conferences fail to do is tap into the resource that is the North American division, in terms of having those leaders come to those conferences, having those leaders create the resources that you need on the ground, so that you don't have to use local conference funding, and you don't have to wait to see if conference funding is available this year or next year. You can actually go to the division with a plan, a vision. You don't even have to have it all worked out, but here's what it is that we need on the ground, and talk to your counterpart at the division. And it is that department's responsibility to see to it that we can actually create this this programming or ministry that you need, and help fund it in some way, so that it can impact what is happening on the local level. We always say at the division, we don't create any money. We spend money though. The money comes from our local churches who are faithful in their tithe and offering. And I just want to pause and say thank you to all of us who are committed to the kingdom of God and being faithful in the little that we have, because it impacts the entire division. And in our case, because we're from the North American division, it actually impacts the entire world church. And so the division can in fact be a tremendous blessing to a local conference if in fact that conference reaches out and say, here's what I need.
Well, thank you, Elder Griffin, for spending this time with us. We have one final question, and that is, you just were elected for a 5-year term. Imagine it's 5 years from now. What would you like to have accomplished during the 5 years that you have?
Figuring out ways. I hope to, by the time we're done, be able to say that we have all grown closer to Jesus Christ in some way, however measurable that looks. But I would hope that by the time we're done, that our churches that are smaller have grown to real measurable numbers, and we've retained everybody that we've ministered to, that we've witnessed to, that we've evangelized, and that I hope that our larger churches would form relationships with our smaller churches and with our communities that are impactful. I'm longing for the day where they say XYZ Seventh-day Adventist Church is the church to connect with in this particular city. That's what I want to be able to hear when you roll into a city, when you roll into to Nashville, when you roll into Yazoo City, when you roll into Fayette, when you roll into these, it would be a great joy to say this particular Seventh-day Adventist church is the church in this city.
Thank you, Elder Griffin, for spending this time with us. I have to say, even though it may sound a little paternalistic, as a person who recommended you to be hired, the person who gave you one of your first preaching opportunities, absolutely, camp meeting, raised the roof. I still remember that sermon. I'm very proud of what the Lord has done in your life, in your ministry. You and Sister Kim and Kaylin. Thank you for being with us. God bless you.
Thank you. Blessings, everyone.
Okay, we want to go to our next guest. And that is our new treasurer for Central States Conference, Mrs. Kelley Parrish. Ms. Parrish, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mrs. Parrish, If you don't mind, can you start us off and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I was born in Sikeston, Missouri, and Sikeston is part of the Central States Territory. Central States territory is the Midwest. And so at the time, my dad was pastoring in that area, and this was his first ministerial assignment. My grandfather, Gabe Taylor Sr., was also pastor in Central States Conference. So I have a lot of history in Central States. I am the second of four children, all of which are girls. I'm a graduate of Oakwood University. I'm married to Mark Paris, and I first met Mark in Denver, and my dad was his pastor in the 80s. So I was friends with his brother and sister, and I sang in a group with his brother and sister and knew his mom. We've been married for 10 years, and he's a pastor in Central States Conference and also works in the conference office as the assistant to the president. We have two children, Simone and Marcus, and I have one son-in-law, Mitchell, and a delightful granddaughter named Layla. And I love being with family. I love hanging out with friends. I love music. I love learning new things. But last and not least, I really love God.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
I was just excited hearing how many things I feel like I have in common with you.
Yes.
Um, can you tell us specifically about your ministerial journey? That what was the path that led you to your current position?
So I would say my ministerial journey started when I was born into a pastor's family, as stated before. I learned a lot about ministry from my parents and my grandparents. When I was at Oakwood, I said I would never marry a pastor, and then I ended up marrying a pastor. But that was years later. So after I graduated from Oakwood, I moved to Orlando, Florida, and I worked for Advent Health in their corporate office as an internal auditor and also director of accounting. And then after that, I worked at a time with the Boys and Girls Club, and I worked in their youth programs. Then I transitioned and I started working for two small accounting firms, helping with tax preparation and doing accounting for small businesses. And then after I married Mark, I moved to Denver and I worked at a company called Nelnet, and they service student loans. And so I helped to account for all the incoming loan payments that Nelnet had. And then Mark was transferred to Kansas City, Kansas to work at the conference office and also to pastor a couple of churches. So when we moved, I was blessed to work at a dental practice and a real estate company in Kansas City, Kansas, helping with their accounting. And then I started working at Central States Conference on a temporary basis because their associate treasurer was ill and the conference needed help. I was only planning to work there on a temporary basis until he got better, but he passed 6 months after I started working there, and I was offered the position permanently as associate treasurer, and that was February 2021. And then at the end of June 2022, I became the treasurer, and I am grateful and humbled by the opportunity to serve.
All right, Ms. Parrish, you have one more thing in common with Mrs. Campbell when you said, I will never marry a pastor. But that's something that I heard um, um, as a from another PK.
Yeah, so I've learned to say never because I said I would never also work at the conference office, and here I am.
Okay, now you work at the conference office as the treasurer of Central States. Central States is our smallest conference. Your tithe is roughly 1/10 the size of our largest conference. So, are there what are the disadvantages, if there are disadvantages, what are they of being the CFO of a small entity?
Well, one disadvantage I would say is financially, our tithe base is smaller than all the other conferences. So we have to work really hard to make our dollar stretch while still continuing to do ministry. There are challenges that we face, funding the different initiatives and programs that we like to have. Of course, I'm sure some conferences have that challenge too, but being a smaller conference, we really just have to make our dollar stretch. So that would be the main disadvantage I would see being a smaller conference.
On the flip side, are there advantages to being small?
There are advantages. They're not financial, but the advantages that we have are that we have less constituencies, and so there's an opportunity to get to know the constituents better. Because I grew up in this conference, there's a lot of people I know, a lot of the seasoned people I know, and then people that are my age I know. So it's kind of nice working in your home conference because you get to know people, and then because we're smaller, there is a better opportunity to know people. The other thing is our president has made an effort to communicate to everyone in our conference that we are family. And so we do really function as family. Our office staff, our pastors, our teachers, and our members, we look out for each other like we are related by blood. And so we're small, but we have a great big heart.
One of the things I noticed when I came to visit was when I came to visit your conference and your pastors was that everybody seemed to know everyone. That was not true when I was in South Central. I used to say I'm the only one who knows all the pastors. But having a much smaller staff, it did seem like everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, everyone likes each other, and we know each other. And as far as I know, there's not a lot of jealousy and cutthroat. We really do function like a family.
That's wonderful to hear. So I'm curious, how many people are on your treasury staff and what are their responsibilities?
Well, there are 3 people on our treasury staff, including me. I have a full-time staff accountant. Her name is Louini Lusant, and she just graduated from Oakwood in May, and she started at Central States Conference in August. She's responsible for processing all the bills, receiving our tithe and other offerings that are collected locally at the churches and sent to us. And then she reports that to the next level, our Mid-America Union. She performs financial reviews of our local churches. She reconciles our bank accounts, helps with wiring the funds, and then she also assists with collecting funds for payroll for the locally funded employees at our churches. And then our second team member is Jonathan Green, and he's our associate treasurer. And he too is an Oakwood graduate. So he's been on our team for 12 years, and he's really been a blessing. We call Jonathan the jack of all trades because he helps everyone do everything, and he does it with such a great spirit. So in addition to his associate treasurer functions, he's the IT director and the risk manager. So he's responsible for the financial statements. He also assists with payroll, the journal entries. He helps to develop policies and procedures. He helps to oversee our yearly audit done by the General Conference Auditing Service. He helps facilitate the claim processes with our churches when they have incidents with their property. And like I said, he probably pretty much does anything everyone needs him to do. And then I am the third team member. We also have our administrative assistant, Barbara Williams, is the administrative assistant for all of our departmental directors. So we share her with the rest of the departments. And so she helps us tremendously, and we appreciate our help. And then everyone in the office really pitches in. Our HR director also helps us as well with various projects. And so we just work together as a team. So we really have, I would say, 2.5 full-time people, a half-time accountants, associate treasurer, and then the other team members just pitch in from the office.
Wow. That is a great team that you have there. As we continue, I have a question of my own. What does it cost to run Central States? And then secondly, I guess an added question to that, what is the largest percentage of that funding? Where does that go to?
Well, it cost about $5.3 million to operate Central States. Now, of course, we would like more funding than that, but that's what at this point it's costing. And the majority of our cost are salaries and wages, benefits, taxes. Some of the benefits are health care. So that percentage is about 66%, which is a great share. So we really have to try to balance that with also doing our ministry programs as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at a spectrum and we're saying what are some of the most rewarding things and what are some of the most difficult things about being a conference treasurer, what would you say on both ends? What's the best, most rewarding thing, and what is the most challenging or difficult thing?
Well, so far, the most rewarding thing about being a conference treasurer is knowing that the work we do in our office indirectly helps to assist with winning souls. I don't go out and preach. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a hooper or a hollerer, but I know that the way that we account for the funds and the way that we distribute the funds, it really does help win souls. And for me, I know that our sole purpose as a conference is to bring people to Jesus. And so if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. So that's really what's one of the most rewarding things for me. And then I would say one of the most difficult things about my job is communicating to our administrators and our pastors or our departmental directors that we can't fund a certain project. That's really hard. It's really heartbreaking. So when we can't do that, that's really so far been one of the most difficult parts of my job.
Oh, Ms. Paris, thank you so much for being with us. I have the final question once again, and so I'm gonna kind of piggyback on what you just said. The most difficult thing is telling administrators no. As an administrator has been told no. I, I I feel that. Okay, but I'm gonna ask you to. We had the general conference treasurer on this program several months ago, so I'm gonna close by asking you the same question I asked him. Let's say somebody heard your despairing cry and called you up this evening and said, "Ms. Parrish, I have a check for however many millions of dollars that would get you to the place where you could do everything you need." I know you treasurers never admit that you have enough money. But if somebody said, if you said I need $3 million, I'll make up a figure, and somebody gave you $3 million today, tell me 3 things that you could use that money for.
All right. So the first thing is we are required, it's a policy by the North American Division to have working capital equivalent to 6 months of our expenses. So that means we need to have cash in the bank to fund 6 months of all of our bills and payroll. And so I would ask for a check to fund 4 times the amount of our working capital. And that would enable us to make sure we have enough in contingency to fund emergencies and just fund whatever programs that we needed at the conference level, to also employ more pastors and just have the proper staffing and the proper funding we need for the initiatives we wanted. The second check I would ask for would be to retire all of our debt at the conference level and all the debt at the local churches. And then we have a beautiful campus in Kansas City. It's actually an historic property, and it's an old monastery, but we have several acres of land. And so I would love the funds to completely renovate our corporate headquarters and also to completely renovate all of our local churches and get them all up to par with the latest technology and classrooms and all the things that we would need to effectively minister. And then the third thing is I would love to have a check to invest our funds, and with the earnings from those funds, never touching the principal, be able to fund all of our ministries at the conference level. We have so many things and so many creative people and so many ideas that we'd like to do, but sometimes we don't have the funding. So I'd love the money to invest ministry at a conference level, at the local level, to really effectively minister to our youth, our young adults, our seniors, our children, our singles, our married couple, women and men, and everyone that is in a category. So those are the 3 things that I would love to do.
Now, Ms. Treasurer, that was a very treasurerly answer. When the very first thing out of your mouth said was, "I need some more money for working capital." So the first thing you would do with the money would be put it in the bank and add to your working capital. But Thank, thank you very much for being with us. God bless. Regards to your husband.
Thank you. God bless.
All right. Halfway through, our next guest is Dr. Abraham Henry. Let's bring on Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry, welcome. Thank you, for joining us. Our first two questions for you are the same two questions that we've asked everybody else. We're trying to introduce our new leaders to our constituents. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to take a moment to thank Elder Edmond and the entire team here just for taking out the time and allowing us to introduce ourselves to the amazing individuals across our church and our fields. So to share a little bit about myself, my name is Abraham Henry, and I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. So I am a native of Brooklyn. I am an identical twin, so I have someone running around who looks just like me. However, I would like to beg to argue that I'm the better looking half. So I am one of five. I will say that I had the privilege of attending Oakwood University. I graduated from City College of New York, where I majored in communications. I received an MDiv from Andrews University, and I received my doctorate of ministry degree in strategic leadership from Claremont School of Theology in California. I am married to the amazing, beautiful, educated, and finer than wine, formerly Rebekah LaFranc. She's now Rebekah Henry. And so that's just a little bit about myself. Yeah.
Okay, now I didn't know you had a twin. So this is telling me something about you that I didn't know. Tell us about your ministerial journey.
Absolutely. I started preaching at the age of 9 years old. And so I started very early. It was a punishment assignment. I was the gentleman in Sabbath school who spoke a little too much. And so they made me, there was a day when we used to do 13 Sabbath. I'm not sure if you guys remember that, but they tasked me with the responsibility to preach, and I never stopped preaching. And so I started preaching at the age of 9 years old. I grew up under an amazing set of pastors who cultivated the gift of preaching in me. And so I became an elder at the age of 15 years old. And this was not a small church in Brooklyn, but it was a church that poured into young people. And I was ordained at 16 years old as a local church elder, served as a Pathfinder and Adventure director in my early teens. And so that was my early start in ministry. A few other things I did that contributed to my ministry journey is I founded and led a group called the Youth Preachers Corps that engaged in pitching tents in Brooklyn, New York, and doing ministry on the front lines of Brooklyn, preaching under tents. We baptized 43 people our first year, and every year we did ministry. I started doing ministry early with gentlemen like Nicardo Delahaye, one of my best friends, Pastor Richard Means, Pastor Daniel Pilgrim, Pastor Damali Boston, Pastor Cassandra Nonan, Pastor Daniel Kelley. These were all individuals at 15 years old. We did ministry in Brooklyn together. We were preaching on and off of the trains. And literally today, out of the group, we have about 16 of us who are in pastoral ministry all across the country. And so those early humble beginnings have made us and me who I am today. Coming out of seminary, while in seminary, I had the privilege to work for Indiana Conference, where I served as a religion teacher. I went on during my seminary experience to pastor the New Jerusalem Seventh-day Adventist Church. I pastored there almost 2.5 to 3 years, and went on to pastor in Central States, where I pastored the New Beginnings Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I'm so honored and humbled to have received the call to come back to Lake Region Conference to serve as youth director. And I say come back, I don't minimize the power of volunteering. I served as the Pathfinder Executive Coordinator while in seminary. And so, didn't think anything of it, just wanted to give my heart and my time to God. And it wound up giving me an opportunity to come back and serve. And so I'm just so grateful to Dr. Jones and Elder Gabriel for that opportunity that they extended to me. And while serving as youth director, my president is an amazing man. He believes in mentoring all generations and all groups of pastors in ministry. And he extended the opportunity for me to serve as the associate executive secretary. And that has allowed me to be a little bit better prepared and currently serving as the executive secretary. So that has been my journey. And I'm grateful not just for the experience, but the amazing people who have helped to make that journey what it is.
So, Dr. Henry, there seems to be kind of a pattern of you getting to do things at an early age, preaching early, serving as elder early, and that seems to have continued because you are one of the youngest, if not the youngest, church administrator in the North American division. What are some advantages to that, and what are some disadvantages?
Okay, I'll start off with advantages. I believe one of the advantages is representation. You know, the honest truth is a lot of younger pastors and preachers, oftentimes they have an idea about how they think the leadership of the church should go. And I remember being one of those individuals, as a early younger pastor. This is the way I think the conference should go and how ministry leadership should go. And what I've realized is sitting at the table, it's not always what we thought it was looking from the outside. But one thing I pride myself in doing is obeying God's call to be a representative, not just for my age group, but also being a representative to my age group. And so being able to have a crystal and authentic voice that helps to represent millennials, Generation X, Generation Z, being able to help introduce new ideas. So that's something that I enjoy, but also helping to share perspectives of what is happening in the world currently today, different trends and ministry, and how we can do it effectively to reach that next generation. And so, those are some of the advantages that I believe I've had in being able to be a younger administrator. You did ask what were the disadvantages. I think one of the disadvantages is resistance to change. Resistance to change in regards to tradition. Traditionally, currently, I would say it is a budding trend. I don't want to say a new trend, but it is a budding trend currently. I wouldn't say that it is a consistent trend. But I will say one of the resistances that I deal with sometimes is people who are distracted in regard to my leadership by how I look, by my age, and people who wonder whether or not I have the experience, the ability, the mental fortitude to be able to operate it. And I truly want to give credit to God. I believe that God has given me wisdom, that God continues to be my source. I don't know it all. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know it all. I don't have 30 years of experience in pastoral ministry. But the one thing I do have is a connection to God. And I have amazing mentors in my life who continue to be present, who speak with me on a regular basis, like my president, who is not just a president, but he is my mentor. He is a father to me in ministry. And one thing that has helped to propel me moving forward, despite some of these disadvantages, is being able to have people who I can call on. Not just my president, but also my union executive secretary. He's someone who checks in on me almost every other day. And so, I thank God the disadvantages keep me humble. They remind me that I didn't get where I am by myself. It allows me to not sit and over process where I'm at. I have never allowed myself to truly take in any of the responsibilities I've bared. Even serving as youth director, I don't think I've allowed myself to fully process that I've had that great honor. All I've done is try to work and be faithful. And so those are some of the advantages and disadvantages that I faced.
So, continuing on in that vein, if you come across, or when you have come across someone, or maybe it hasn't happened specifically, maybe this would be more of a if in case situation, but if you come across, as the Bible says, someone despising your youth, if you have experienced that without being, feeling like you have to be overly personal or too specific, how did you respond in cases like that?
That has been my life story. My life story, starting off early in ministry, has been sitting in a position where I thought at one point that I had to prove that I was worthy or prove that I was good enough. And I've realized that I'll never be good enough. I'm a sinner saved by grace, but I have an opportunity and I have to answer to God and I have to do the best with what is in my hands. And so ways that I have dealt with some of those experiences is never trying to prove to anyone anything. just being faithful and continuing to work and allow God to make his own case, which is the fact that he has called me. Pitching a tent in Brooklyn, New York at 16 years old with a group of teenagers. I'm talking about a tent that sat 400 people on Empire, New York Avenue, being able to transport a pool from the campgrounds over 200 miles away to Brooklyn, New York, being able to organize a Bible working team, being able to raise over $40,000 for this evangelistic meeting, and being able to baptize 43 people in a matter of 4 weeks. That comes from God. Those things, it's not intellect. We didn't have degrees, but it's God, and God truly prepared us. And so what I realized is we had elders each night who stood up outside the tent who didn't believe this was going to happen. And my home church at the time was not in favor of giving $5,000 to it, but our pastor stepped out and used his evangelism budget. And what I have found is that we have much more people who are for young people serving in ministry than those who are skeptical. And tonight, if I have any youth or young adults who are hearing me, don't prove, just serve. Be faithful and serve. Let God do what he does. God is the greatest defense attorney.
Mhm.
Wow. That spoke a word. That spoke a word. Sounds like you're giving a sermon, Pastor. You're giving a sermon. But I want to ask you, what is something that you're very passionate about? I guess when it comes to your ministry, what is something that you're very passionate about, and how did that become your passion?
Evangelism. I am passionate about evangelism. It became my passion. I have a very unique start. I did not grow up a Seventh-day Adventist. I initially started off as a Jehovah's Witness. And so I was used to, at the very tender age of 3 and 4 years old, knocking on doors with my mom and other congregants and sharing the good news, but receiving the amazing Seventh-day Adventist message. That passion and zeal to go wherever God leads led me to having that passion for evangelism. I learned how to preach without a pulpit. I did not always have a pulpit, but getting up and preaching on the train every single day on the way to school in front of people I did not know, preaching on street corners, preaching in the projects by hooking up a microphone to a community center and speaking to people as they looked outside of project windows. That has given me my passion. And when I served as the Youth Preachers Corps president, I had the unique opportunity of being able to not just train, but create opportunities for young people to preach and do ministry. And being able to do it on this level is a very humbling thing. That's one of the things that I'm passionate about. I'm also very passionate about youth ministries. And I was worried about still being passionate about youth ministries because I was worried that being an executive secretary, that if I'm still passionate about youth and young adult ministries, it's going to make people feel like I should still be the youth and young adult director, and that maybe they made a mistake by placing me as the executive secretary. But one thing I realize is my passion will never die for youth and young adults, because youth and young adults are important to Jesus, and he had the same passion. And one thing I do know is that being the executive secretary has given me a greater ability and opportunity to help provide more resources for my conference youth director and my young adult director, being able to support them, being able to hang out in the office and vision cast and find out how I could be a voice for them. And so, those are some of the areas that I'm passionate about. I'm also passionate about my brothers and sisters, which are the colleagues that I have in my conference. I don't believe that I serve higher than them. I believe I serve wider than them, which simply means that I'm there to help support them. I genuinely care for the fellow pastors that I work with. I genuinely have a lot of love for them. You can't not love people you pray for every day. People who you support and run into every day, people you check on regularly. And so I'm excited that I have the full-time opportunity to help support people being great.
I have 2 questions as we begin to move this to a close. I've known you, I met you when you were in Central States and have worked with you since you've become the executive secretary. Sometimes we hear, and I have no doubt that some of the complaints are legitimate, complaints about younger people not being able to work with older people and all that sort of thing. You seem to be able to work well with people who are older than you. So kind of share with us, if for young adults who are listening out there and who are feeling like, oh, I can't, there's no hope in terms of working with older people, they don't listen, blah, blah, and I'm not saying some of that's not legitimate, but you seem to have been able to connect. Tell us how you're able to do that.
Absolutely. I think it's being authentic, genuinely loving and caring for people, and never thinking that we know it all. There are some older individuals in our church who have a gift that we would be missing without them. And that's wisdom. It's being able to learn from them. It's being able to sit in their presence and not just hear them, but listen to them. Their mentorship has helped to make me who I am. And I think that it's something that will help a whole lot of younger pastors. I don't seek to do stuff on my own. I seek to make sure that we all have a valued space and place at the table. And if I have older or more senior leaders, like my conference administrators and my leaders, and they're able to make a space for me, I consider it a responsibility to always help to make sure that they have a space that's valued and important to them. We don't have to make room for young people. We don't have to get rid of older people. I believe that there's a space and place for all of us at the table. I believe a multi-generational table is going to result in helping to be multi-generationally successful and winning all souls. And so that has been my experience, and loving on people. Everyone is not going to take you in right away. I've experienced it, but hang in there, love, and remember there are some things that are won in the moment and some things that are won in the mile. The more authentic you are, the more you care, and the least you give up is the more respect that you'll garner from people you're surrounded by.
Okay, real quickly, because I think we only have time for one or two more questions. Tell us for the benefit of our audience who may not understand how the church works. The conference executive secretary is kind of like the equivalent of the vice president. So what are your responsibilities?
It's dealing with mainly the administrative affairs of the conference. So record keeping, record establishing, minutes to meetings, being able to retain stuff, statistic development, baptisms, membership, legal affairs. I'm the chief human resources officer, so onboarding, all those details. I also serve as the office manager, so dealing with the day-to-day operations of the conference office, campground administrator, partnering and helping to lead risk management. And also helping to coordinate pastoral installations. Essentially, it's doing whatever I can do to assist my president and to assist and work along with my treasurer to help make sure things keep moving. So really and truly, there's the inbox definition, but the outbox definition is whatever God asks me to do that's going to help to push the team along.
Wow. As we come to a close, we wish we could be here longer with you and ask you a whole bunch of other questions, but I have just a final question for you. What do you like most about your position? And if you could change anything, what would you change?
What I like most about my position is connecting with people still. Knowing that what I'm doing, for instance, going through a contract, legal affairs, risk management, I'm helping to keep money in ministry. If it's not spent on a lawsuit, it can be used to help further the work and do evangelism. So I like stuff like that. I enjoy that. Things that I didn't, if there's anything that I could change, what I would change is there are moments where I miss pastoring, moments where I miss being in the trenches. There are moments where I miss knowing when the next communion is. And consistently building relationships in a local congregational context. Sometimes I see people and I'm not going to see them again for another year or two. So those are things that I wish I could change, but I do understand the responsibility of it. And there's so much more great and goodness in this role that I embrace, that it overshadows those things that I wish I could change.
Dr. Henry, thank you so much for being with us. As I said, when I was with you in Chicago, I really consider you to be one of our up and coming leaders, ready to as old people like me step off the stage, young people like you make me realize the church is in good hands. So thank you for spending this time with us, and may the Lord be with you in your leadership.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Blessings.
All right, our last guest. This is kind of a historic appointment of Elder Kirk Nugent, who is he very well may be the first media pastor in the history of a regional conference church. For certainly, I don't know anybody who holds that position now. And so we consider your appointment to be historic.
Wow.
Pastor Nugent, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be
Pastor
here.
Nugent, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Kirk Nugent, and my parents are Raphael and Eunice, and they hail from the beautiful island of Jamaica. I was born in Queens, New York. So some would say I was born in Jamaica still, but anyway, we quickly migrated to Florida. So that's where I grew up, St. Petersburg, Florida. That's home. That's where I still call, home. When I talk about going home, that's where I go because my parents are still there. One of my siblings is still there. I'm actually in the middle of the middle. I got a chance to talk with Elder Edmond last week, and I was like, I've got two above me, two below me. So as they say, blessed are the middle children, no peacekeepers, but middle children. But yes, I'm married to Kanique Mighty. Kanique Mighty is her maiden name. Kanique Mighty Nugent is her name now, and she's a web designer, and both of us are in business together. I do the video and media broadcasting things, and she does the web presence and web design, web maintenance. In fact, she is one of the web designers for ORCM, and we've enjoyed that partnership for many years. We are blessed with two kids, Carson, our son, and Kenzie, our daughter. So that's a little bit about us, and we currently live in Huntsville, Alabama.
Thank you. So, Elder Edmond referred to your position as a historic position. Can you tell us about the journey that your ministry has led you on that allowed you to reach this historic placement?
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, as they say. That a lot of people know me and who have known me and have been familiar with my story over the years, the different places that I've been able to work, the different things God has placed within my story. It all kind of has led to this space. But I'm an IT professional by trade and training. I like to call myself a self-professed Jesus geek. But I got my degree in bachelor's from Andrews University in engineering technology, and then worked for NASA. That was my first job out of college, NASA in Greenbelt, Maryland, Goddard Space Flight Center. Then moved on to T. Rowe Price. So I got the government side, and then I got the finance side, right? So stocks, bonds, mutual funds, investing, and then got the awesome opportunity by a very interesting set of events, which God doesn't do anything any other way, by allowing me to come into the General Conference Treasury Department as their technical support specialist and manage their ERP system, which manages the finances for the World Church for the 13 divisions. And so traveling across the globe, doing some things there, got a chance to really get familiar with the world field, working at the General Conference. And in fact, it was that activity that caused me to be familiar with, in fact, doing several projects with the folks in South Africa. And they extended a call for me to be their IT director. So I worked, and my family and I accepted that call, and we lived and worked in South Africa from 2010 to 2015. And I served there as their IT director for training, and moved around the 23 countries in the SADC region there on the beautiful continent of Africa. And then, of course, in the Indian Ocean and Atlantic Ocean as well. So that led to another set of interesting and miraculous events, opened up an opportunity for both myself and my wife to be called to work and serve at Oakwood University. So we moved 7 years ago from Pretoria, South Africa to Huntsville, Alabama. Don't try this at home, folks. But we moved, and Kanique was their web designer, and I was the chief information officer with purview and responsibility of all of the technology things in that space. All throughout my story, however, is the recurring theme of people always saying to me, I just feel like you should be a pastor. Your leadership style, the way you carry yourself, even the things that people gravitate towards asking me to do. For the last several years standing, I've been the event pastor for all of the IT meetings in the Southern Union when Richard Stevenson was the IT director here, and then moved on to the NAD, where he continued to call me to be the Edmond pastor. In fact, he is the GCCIO now. We're functioning as associate treasurer, and they'll be having their global IT meetings in Brazil next year. And he's asked me to function as the event IT pastor yet again. So, this is this recurring theme that just kept on coming up. And while I always did feel the call, I just always felt like I was doing what God had called me to do with the unique skills and talents that he had entrusted to me. So not necessarily working in the formal capacity of a pastor, but continuing to do what I knew God was calling me to do. Very shortly after, leaving Oakwood and working on my own, leaving Oakwood, I should say, and working for Wallace State Community College, which is another institute of higher education here in North Alabama, my wife and I just felt very impressed that it was the time for us to kind of step out on our own, to do our own thing. And so it's in that space that I got a chance to become a YouTuber and content creator, working with brands like StreamYard, which is what we're using right now. I've had the privilege of working with them on several projects. In fact, I do a lot of instructional videos for them still. Ecamm is another one, and then also doing digital church consulting. So I work with a platform called Altar Live, and literally walk churches through the process of taking their ministry online. All right. And all of the different steps that it takes, and what are some of the pitfalls, what are the things to avoid. We're literally running cohort number 7 right now, taking multiple different churches from different faith traditions through this process and helping them realize the exponential opportunity that is online for the gospel. And so it's in that whole conversation, some of the things that, again, God has just uniquely placed in my story. I was working, of course, as media director at The Bridge, which is a campus of First Seventh-day Adventist Church. And at the time, Pastor Green was our pastor. And of course, Pastor Snell was the lead pastor, senior pastor at First Church. And so, of course, we got many opportunities to work with one another. He was very familiar with what I was doing and some of the things I'm doing in the online space as well. So a couple months ago, we got a chance to really start talking about what would it look like to join Breath of Life and Oakwood University Church in ministry. And we one of the things I love about Pastor Snell is he is a visionary. Just complete visionary. And he said, listen, I want you to pray about this thing for a week. Don't call me back. Just pray on this thing and let's see what God does. And it was in that week that I heard God say almost unequivocally that everything I have placed within your story is preparing you for this moment. And there's some things that we are going to do, that God is going to do in this season that we have not seen done before. And so I'm excited as well. People come up to me all the time like, man, I'm excited to see what you're going to do. And I respond, I'm excited to see what's going to happen too, because I don't know either. But I am a willing vessel in God's hands. And I'm just looking forward to see how we can harness the power, the exponential opportunity, as I said before, of online, and how we can, as I say, storm the gates of hell to reach people with the gospel in that space.
It was, when you were speaking of Richard Stevenson, it was so interesting to me because he did his student teaching at Madison Academy when I was there as a student. I'm not going to put any years out for any of us. It won't be good for any of us for me to put those years out.
He's a really good friend,
that was a nice throwback for me to remember the high school times there.
Not to cut you off, but his story is, and what God is doing with him and where he is now and how he is, as he's serving, is just amazing as well to see. And this is, I think, a testimony to the fact that God is kind of shining a floodlight on skill sets that heretofore have not been called upon in ministry in the way that we have. And I'm excited to see what that means for the broader church.
That is the perfect segue into my question. If I were to give you this sentence as a fill in the blank, because not everyone would know, what a media pastor, what the purpose of a media pastor would be. So if I gave you the sentence, Oakwood or any church, particularly a large one, needs a media pastor because, how would you complete that sentence?
Well, I would say that we would want to differentiate, but yes, Oakwood needs a media pastor. I think needed or it will work well with a media pastor because there is an intentionality to what we want to do online. What we're talking about is engaging our online viewers. I don't know how many people you have watching on a week-to-week basis, whatever church you might be from. I don't know where you're watching from, but Oakwood is in the position where it has thousands of people watching online on a week-to-week basis. Do we want them to stay at that level, or do we want to call them to deeper? Do we want to engage them in that two-way conversation that creates community, true community? Let me tell you, there are people that I'm meeting this week at PELC that I have not met over the last 2.5 years. And when we meet together, it is as if we have known one another for years. There is a possibility to experience true community online. And so how can we harness that? How can we set that up with efficiency? And how can we have someone whose purview and responsibility is laser focused on just providing that one particular leadership capacity? And that's what the media pastor's role is. And that's why Oakwood University Church absolutely needed one. Now, the reason why I hasten to add, whatever your church context might be, as they say, it depends, right? It depends what your context is. What is your mission? What is your goal? What is your overarching zeal and vision for what you see as your next steps? That's the first piece. And then the second piece is, what is your online footprint? Not everyone has like I said, thousands of people watch Oakwood University Church and Breath of Life. And so they have a responsibility, in my opinion, to shepherd that online audience in the same way and with the same level of intentionality as they do with those who are physically in the building. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. I feel as if that you've answered kind of the question that I was going to ask you about kind of your responsibilities, but I guess there may be a few more things you could add to that. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that question to you. What are your exact responsibilities as a media pastor?
Yeah. I serve as online media pastor, right? So with responsibility of social media, content creation. And for those that don't know what that means, this is content that is placed online for the purposes of other people to engage with, for people to be edified, for people to be sometimes entertained, but also educated. So serving in the capacity of social media, online content creation, and what is also called as the Praise Cafe, which engages online viewers and members and worshipers at the University Church, both prior to service and after the Sabbath service. So that is the kind of technical definition, but just kind of giving some more color to that. I think Pastor Snell, as I mentioned, wanted to encourage and engage and disciple people online, and wanted somebody to really have laser focus on that. And so how can we not only engage the seekers, right? The seekers, that's one term, but how can we resource our own people? There are things that we do at Oakwood University Church, and we do it very well, but unless you have the opportunity to look behind the scenes and see what we do, you may not be exposed to best practices. And so one of the other charges that I will have is really helping to build a catalog, I should say, of content that people can search through and learn, okay, what does the floor manager do? What does the facilities manager do? And what does the parking director do? And one of the things that I love about it is that we are not just going to share it from the, just bullet point standpoint. We were going to share from the standpoint of the person who is parking cars in the parking lot has the responsibility of praying over those empty spots prior to service. This is a powerful task. This is a powerful role. And praying over the families that will park their car there. If every member, no matter the capacity, can take that level of intentionality to their function at a given church, what would we see happen for the cause of Christ?
We only have time for maybe one or two questions.
Sure.
One or two more questions. Here's one of them. You are probably the first person to do this. Mm-hmm. I hope you're not the last.
Me too.
But I used to serve in the capacity where those kind of decisions were made. So if I were still doing what I used to do, what I would want to know before I brought a media pastor on would be, how is this going to grow the church financially and numerically? So how would you answer that question?
Listen, there's one of the, let me just share it this way, and I hope I can be brief. One of the largest departments at Apple and Amazon is not research and development. It's not programming. It's not design. it's not even innovation. The largest department at both Apple and Amazon is user experience. User experience. And the reason why that's the largest department, because it encompasses everything. And I think as leaders are trying to grapple with, is this a thing? What is the user experience? What is the viewer experience? What is the worship experience of those who are online? If Apple and Amazon are investing to the tune of millions because they want to curate it from the moment you search for that term to the moment it ends up at your doorstep with that smile on the box, they curate every single step in the process. How intentional can we be in curating the experience for our worshipers online? Not just letting it be voyeuristic where they're just looking over our shoulders through a camera. Can we speak to them not only in the moments when we need them to give? Can we speak to them specifically about their announcements, about their giving programs, about their small groups, about things that pertain to just the online experience? How can we be laser focused on that? And I believe that people, those who have the awesome opportunity to make those kinds of decisions, must grapple with what is the current experience and how would you like to see that change? And one of the things I think they will come to in terms of conclusion is that we need somebody to guide that particular role.
Powerful.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been so eye-opening just to hear your vision and this new field. I appreciate that. I think I have one more question.
Sure.
If we could forecast 12 months from now to December 2023 or 2023, what things will need to have happened to make you feel as though the Lord has blessed you to be successful as our first media pastor?
My goodness, what a question. A couple of check marks that I would immediately throw out is, number one, content that permeates culture. I think we do a really good job of creating content that works for us as Adventists within our faith tradition, within our own circles and our own communities. But can we create content that permeates culture? So one of the things I would really like to see 12 months from now is that we are making a dent in creating content that permeates culture, that content that the sneakerheads are going to be talking about, content that my gamers are going to be talking about, content that my 13 and 12-year-old will talk about because it's a part of culture. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be, of course, establishing a clear two-way communication. Clear two-way communication with our online audience, letting them feel that they're a part. I would love to see us perform a baptism in the location for one of our online members who will have never been to Huntsville and probably will never come to Huntsville. I would love to see that kind of engagement, something that is laser focused and intentional for the online viewer, letting them know just because you're in this space does not mean you're a second class member. Doesn't mean you're sitting in the balcony, as it were, and we're just kind of yelling to you and you can't yell back. I want to make sure that there's clear two-way communication. And then lastly, consistent needs-based content. So content that answers questions. I believe the Seventh-day Adventist Church, probably more than any other church, and I know I'm biased, but I have had the privilege of working with multiple denominational entities. We have answers to questions far above any others, and we are not putting them out there in ways that will pick up the algorithm, in ways that will pick up the conversation that is happening at the water cooler, in the workplace, at the barbershop. People are searching for the answers, but we are not putting out our content in ways that allows them to find it. A lot of these things that are out here, the whole entire online experience, as they say, Main Street USA has now become the online setup, right? Because Main Street used to be where everything used to happen. That was the main thoroughfare. We wanted to make sure our message was in Main Street. Well, we need to make sure our message is online now. And we need to make sure that even as we exist in those spaces, we are following best practices in those spaces so that our message, the message, can have its furthest impact and its furthest reach.
Thank you, Pastor Nugent, for spending this time with us. I can sense your passion jumping through the computer. This is I think this is a groundbreaking appointment. I want to affirm Elder Snell
Absolutely.
and the rest of the team for thinking out of the box. I think that if other churches follow this, it's going to enable us to reach a bunch of people. I mean, millions of people
Absolutely.
with the gospel of Jesus Christ that we can't reach right now.
Right.
So our prayers are with you as you enter into this groundbreaking assignment. Thank you for what you're doing already. I've had the privilege for the last several years of working with the company that you and your wife formed, and it's and I know we're just one of several church entities
That is correct.
that you consult for and that you're a blessing for. And so thank you very much. Regards to Sister Kanique, and may the Lord bless you.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this first Sabbath. We have a large number of new leaders in our regional conference church. This is part one of introducing our constituents to these new leaders. I have been blessed by meeting with the four we had today. Again, our thanks go to Doctors Griffin and Henry, Pastor Nugent, and Mrs. Paris. Thank you for joining us and for sharing a little bit about yourself and your work. We'll be back here again in January with several more new leaders to introduce our constituents. Mrs. Campbell, thank you for filling in for Ms. Rebekah. Would you pray to close, please?
I would be glad to do that, Elder Edmond. Let's bow our heads. Lord, we thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, to see the work that you're doing, Lord, in the regional churches, the leaders that you've put in place, and the plan that you've put in play for all of us to follow, Lord. We ask that you be with us as we separate. Bring us back together again in January as we get to meet even more of the leaders that are out doing your work. In your name we pray and thank you. Amen.
Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence. Have a wonderful holiday season. For Mark Hyde and Mrs. Campbell, I'm Elder Edmond. Thank you for joining us, and good night.
Good night.